We are delighted now to be joined by Mark Rubenfire. He is an attorney and partner at the Jaffe Law Firm. And Attorney Rubenfire, thank you very much for joining us here in the MegaCast. Good to have you today.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
Well, thank you for joining us. I assume you are in a space that looks very office-like. Have you been working at home? Are you in the office, or how's it going for
This is
you?
an office in my house. I've been here since March 13th, working at home. When we first started working at home, I was quite busy and seemed like I was working in the office. More recently, it's become a little bit more sparse as the real estate market has changed.
So we want to talk to you about real estate today, and let's get right to it. Just casual observation, driving around. There's a lot of businesses that clearly have not opened, and I think you just take account and you start to look and you wonder whether a lot of them are ever going to be able to open back up. How are things going in the real estate market? And let's talk specifically about commercial real estate, first of all.
Yeah, so apartment, I have clients in various different areas of the real estate world. Apartment owners, storage property owners haven't seen much change yet. People are still paying their rent. People are obviously still occupying their apartments. In fact, they're probably occupying them more often than they normally would, which is putting stress on the properties. But it's in the retail world, the shopping centers and the strip centers, where we're seeing the most difficulty, early on. And in particular, it's because obviously businesses are shut down and not operating, which makes it hard for the small businesses to pay their rent, which obviously affects the landlords.
So, what are landlords doing? Let's talk about them for a minute. Clearly, people are going to have trouble paying their rent. Is there relief for landlords so they can keep making their mortgage payments during this time?
So, a number of landlords have applied for, in certain cases, and got what are called PPP loans, Payment Protection Program loans, which has assisted them not only with paying their employees, but paying their rent. Hopefully some of the small businesses did the same thing, that their tenants did the same thing, which allowed them to pay their rent payments. I'm sorry, the landlords are obviously paying their mortgage payments, but the tenants are paying their rent through the PPP loan program in some cases, along with their employees. So that's been a help. But the other thing to consider for all of these landlords is modifying leases. How do they deal with their tenants in terms of the tenants need to have short-term relief while they're closed, and what the landlords need to do to be able to give that to them. We've had certain situations where tenants have asked for 6 months of relief, and our recommendation to those landlords that have gotten those requests is to not commit to anything for that long. As you probably know, the pandemic has changed things greatly, and each day there's new things that come about. And we've recommended to our clients that they only commit to short-term relief for their tenants where it's appropriate. And obviously, each tenant situation is different. A grocery store or a drugstore that's continuing to operate and maybe even busier than they are quite different than the hair salon or whatever it may be that isn't able to operate and still is not able to open.
Well, hopefully today is going to be a really good day. Mark Rubenfire, attorney partner at the Jaffe Law Firm, and one that is working in real estate. Hopefully today will be a really good day, because today retail opens back up to some degree, and today also we're going to see the opening of the auto dealers and also opening some of the medical offices. So anyone who's made it now, hopefully they got a chance to do a little bit better. Are you hearing encouraging signs from any of your property owners out there?
Well, a lot of them have said that they're more worried about, right now the businesses are starting to reopen. We're hoping that their tenants can get back up to speed and somewhere near where they were before. And some businesses will be able to do that better than others. A lot of strip centers, malls were in trouble before the pandemic. Obviously the big box retailers and Amazon have impacted the ability of those small businesses to stay in business. So with the pandemic on top of that, and people getting more used to being able to order things online and buy things online or through pickup at a big box operation, it's become more and more difficult for the small businesses to operate. We think in some cases that at least my clients have said that they're optimistic about the tenants' ability to get open again and start operating. Right now, a lot of it is on by appointment only and by curbside, which makes things more difficult. But there is some optimism. What people are really worried about now is not necessarily this week or next, but August or September, and whether the businesses that can reopen will survive longer term.
That is the big question. And it's what we're all concerned about. The PPP money starts to go away. Some of the federal relief starts to go away. And I think a lot of businesses are just hoping, hey, can I get through June? Can I get through July? And then what's it gonna look like on the other side? So no one knows. We're all waiting, crossing our fingers, and hoping the economy is going to come back. For tenants, because I'm sure you have some clients that are tenants as well. Should tenants that have been shut down and had a hard time, is it appropriate for them to ask their landlord for some kind of relief? And where should they start?
So we've counseled both landlords and tenants on how to handle the situation. And similar to what I was saying earlier about landlords, tenants should be practical about what they're asking for. Most landlords would be required to get the permission of their lender to grant relief to a tenant. So a tenant needs to carefully evaluate what their situation is, when they think they can be reopened, and what the economic impact is. And when we've counseled tenants, we've recommended to them that they be as honest as possible with their landlords in terms of what their expectations are. A lot of landlords are interested in granting relief as long as they fully understand the impact, to the bottom line, the impact to their employees of the tenant. And some landlords have been willing to grant either complete forbearance and forgiveness of rent for a period of time, month or two. And then after that, as the tenants are starting to reopen, landlords have offered half rent in some cases, or the opportunity to backload the rent to the end of the term of the lease and not pay it currently. We've tried to get creative in those situations, but obviously, as you mentioned earlier, landlords need to be able to pay their mortgage payments. So whatever they do, they need to be able to put themselves in a situation where that isn't going to be compromised. So it's complicated. Each situation is very unique. And each tenant is very different in terms of their particular situation. And we've tried to run the gamut of different ideas, which can address both the need to get the landlord some rent if possible and give the tenant time to get reopened. Ironically, the PPP loans that everybody has touted are designed to pay employees of the tenant their compensation, and also the tenants are allowed to use it for rent. Unfortunately, some of the tenants that aren't able to reopen have had to pay their employees to stay at home, and those monies are now running out as they're now able to reopen. So it's very complicated. Long term, the landlords want the tenants to be able to be in business, so they're trying to work with them currently to get them over the hump to get back and up and operating.
Mark Rubenfire is with us. He is an attorney and partner at the Jaffe Law Firm. You are watching and listening to the MegaCast. Dave Scott along with Tyler Keefe, and you're tuned in to Lakes FM, the Biff 89.5, Avondale Community Radio, Birmingham Municipal Access, Civic Center TV in the Lakes area, and we are live right now on the West Bloomfield Parks Facebook page and Civic Center TV.com. So we're entering the new normal. Things have changed. We've learned as a society over the past couple of months that it's okay to work at home. And for a lot of people that maybe have never worked at home in the past, they're finding it's kind of cool in some ways. Employers also are doing the Zoom meeting thing. A lot of folks are working at home. They may find some efficiencies. That could impact our office building market here in southeastern Michigan. Mark Rubenfire, any thoughts about what that market is going to look like in the next 6 months to a year?
Well, as with everything, we're in the early stages of this, and nobody knows for sure. But I agree with you that this stay-at-home period where people have gotten comfortable staying at home has certainly changed the dynamic for businesses that need offices. We have a couple of clients that were actually in the office sharing business, and there's great concern about what that business will be like going forward because of the need to have people in small spaces. In terms of, for example, our law firm, when we even go back, we're going to go back in stages. And I think a lot of us will continue to work at home as much as possible. We'll have staff in our offices, but much smaller staffs. And I think long term, that means that people will tend to want to use less office space, and it will impact the office market. Everything's an unknown, though, at this point. I mean, it's hard to say exactly what level we can go to in terms of condensing office space and people spending much less time in the offices. One of the issues our firm is dealing with is we have a number of employees who have young kids at home. I'm older and don't have young kids staying in my house, but our attorneys in our office that do have had a difficult time trying to manage their kids, teaching them, monitoring their schoolwork, and then also trying to work at the same time. So we'll see. I think it will impact the market. I think there are also some people that have discovered that working at home isn't for them. And I think it will have an impact. I'm not one of those that thinks it's going to have a huge impact, because I think people will want to have some time in the office generally.
No, I mean, we all like getting into the office and mingling with others, but there certainly has been a shift, and how it all works out will be interesting. You know what I was wondering the other day, just driving around looking at all these big office buildings in Oakland County. I was just thinking, well, some of these are vacant already. We may have more vacancies. And on the other side, there's always a win. There's always a pivot. And right now we may have a shortage of residential space as people are working at home. Maybe they need that in-home office. Maybe they want to have a little bit more living space. Could you convert a 5, 6, 7-story office building into an apartment complex? I imagine that would take some zoning and some help, but a lot of these office buildings, maybe they can be converted into residential, or is that a totally crazy idea?
Well, it's a zoning question in a lot of cases. There's limited zoning for mixed use development, and buildings aren't necessarily built in a way to accommodate plumbing wise, heating wise, converting it from office to residential. But I don't think that's too far-fetched. The idea that there's going to be excess office space going forward and some properties may need to be converted is certainly possible. I'm certainly not an expert on how you do that, but I do think maybe not necessarily in West Bloomfield, but in Birmingham, for example, the idea that some office space might be converted to residential makes complete sense to me.
All right. Mark, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Mark Rubenfire, attorney, partner, Jaffe Law Firm. Mark, before we run along, anything else you want to add that might be helpful for our listeners and viewers?
Well, the one thing I would say, I mean, obviously this is early, but if there was a similar issues in the real estate market in 2008 where there were so many issues that came about as a result of the Great Recession, I have a concern that if we have a similar downturn and recession because of the pandemic, that it might impact city services. The tax values, property values will go down, tax income will go down, and ultimately we'll have a significant strain on municipalities and their ability to pay bills. And that's a long-term concern that hopefully won't happen, but I see a lot of similarities potentially with 2008, 2009.
Well, we certainly hope we will not go through another crunch and run of massive bankruptcies and home values dwindling here in southeastern Michigan, and because it would not only have impact on the municipalities, but all the people that are suffering through it. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for a V. That's all we can do, hope for a V. So, Mark, thank you very much. Good to chat with you today. We really appreciate it. Good to have you on the show, and let's keep in touch, and hopefully we can talk again soon.